The Veyari Dominion had ruled the Orion Arm for 317 cycles without losing a single fleet engagement. Their crown jewel was the dreadnought Kalathra Vox, a 60-kilometer dagger of obsidian alloy, 9 kilometers long, bristling with phase disruptor lances that could carve moons in half. Its shields laughed at antimatter torpedoes. Its sublight engines could outrun light lag itself through sheer acceleration. Every species that had ever faced it, Kavari, Sarl, the insectoid hives of the Reach, the silicon saints of Procyon, had broken and run or simply ceased to exist. The Galactic Concordance, humanity's loose alliance with a dozen minor species, had nothing that could match it. When the Kalathra Vox appeared above Epsilon Eridani in late 2247, the human admiralty did what any rational command would do. They ordered a full retreat and prepared the colony for glassing. But one captain refused the order. Her name was Captain Mara Vale, commanding the light cruiser CSS Tycho Brahe, an obsolete survey vessel hastily retrofitted with second-hand railguns and a spinal particle lance that hadn't been calibrated in 6 years. The Tycho was 380 meters long, carried a crew of 214, and its armor wouldn't stop a drunk pilot in a shuttle, let alone the flagship of the Dominion. Mara was 42 standard years old, born on the Martian borough of New London, raised in low-G tenements where the air always tasted of rust. She had a reputation for being 3 things: stubborn, unlucky in love, and absolutely unafraid of dying if the math said it was worth it. When Fleet Command broadcast the retreat order, Mara muted the channel, turned to her bridge crew, and said, "We're not running. Plot an intercept on the Kalathra Vox." Her executive officer, Commander Tariq al-Hussein, stared at her as if she'd suggested jumping out an airlock naked. "Ma'am, that thing eats battle groups for breakfast." "Exactly," Mara said, strapping into the command chair. "So nobody's going to expect us to ram a steak knife down its throat." The crew laughed, nervous, disbelieving laughter, but they obeyed. They always did. Mara had that effect. The Kalathra Vox hung above Epsilon Eridani for like a black eclipse. Its commander, High Strategist Veyari 9, was a being of pure logic, grown in a maturation vat, its mind linked directly to the ship's quantum lattice. It had calculated 4,712 possible human responses to its arrival: surrender, evacuation, suicide charges by small craft. None of the scenarios involved a single obsolete cruiser accelerating straight at it at 0.31 c. Veyari 9 ran the numbers again. The probability of threat was 0.0004%. It dismissed the anomaly and resumed orbital bombardment. Mara's plan was insane, but it was the kind of insane that only works when the enemy is too arrogant to imagine it. Phase 1. Make them notice us. The Tycho Brahe came in ballistic, engines cold, pretending to be a piece of debris. At 800,000 kilometers, Mara lit the main drive at full military power and began broadcasting on every frequency the Veyari used. "This is Captain Mara Vale of the Concordance starship Tycho Brahe. You are in violation of the Eridani Accords. Power down weapons and prepare to be boarded, or we will open fire." Static for 10 full seconds. Then a voice like grinding glaciers answered in perfect, accentless English. "Human captain, your mass is 41,000 tons. Ours is 2.9 billion. Your energy output is that of an insect spart. Withdraw." Mara smiled without humor. "Negative, Kalathra Vox. You have 1 minute to comply." Another pause. Veyari 9 was running simulations. In 0.7 seconds, it concluded the human was bluffing. It allocated 0.3% of its point defense grid to the insect and continued glassing cities. That was the moment Mara had waited for. Phase 2. Make them angry. "Fire the lance," she said quietly. The Tycho's spinal particle lance was old, underpowered, and half its focusing magnets were cracked. But at 600,000 kilometers, it's still too far for anything serious. It spat a beam of relativistic protons straight into the Kalathra Vox's forward shield node. The shield shrugged it off. Barely a shimmer. But the beam carried something else, a tight-band virus packet riding the carrier wave. Human cyber warfare engineers had spent 4 years studying captured Veyari code. They'd found one universal constant. The Dominion's ships were proud. Their firewalls literally filtered out anything that didn't announce itself with the proper aristocratic encryption headers. The virus announced itself as a formal surrender demand from the human admiralty, signed with the stolen private key of Fleet Admiral Singh herself. Veyari 9's lattice accepted the packet without hesitation. It opened the attachment. 40.34 seconds, longer than most civilizations last in war, the Kalathra Vox's entire command hierarchy froze while it parsed what it assumed was humanity's capitulation. In that 0.34 seconds, the Tycho Brahe crossed another 100,000 kilometers. Phase 3. Make them bleed. Mara's chief engineer, Lieutenant Sparks Okafor, had spent the last month stripping every non-essential system from the ship. Life support was running at 60%. All power conduits were rerouted to a single weapon that didn't officially exist, a cobbled-together Kasaba howitzer nuke, a relic from the pre-concordant Soul War, jury-rigged to the railgun spine. Normal yield, 40 kilotons, shaped into a spear of plasma hotter than the core of a star. Mara's version had been fed every spare gram of antimatter the fleet could scrounge. Theoretical yield, 0.8 megatons, focused into a needle 30 meters wide. Range for effect, 40,000 kilometers or less. The Kalathra Vox realized it had been tricked at the same moment the Tycho crossed the 50,000-kilometer line. Veyari 9 devoted 18% of its lattice to stopping the cruiser. Phase lances converged. Point defense rail flechettes accelerated to 0.12 c. Most of them missed. Mara had ordered the helmsman to fly drunk, random walk, 11G burns in every direction, no predictability. The Tycho danced like a fly evading a laser grid. At 42,000 kilometers, the Kasaba spear fired. It wasn't an explosion. It was a sword of white fire that punched straight through the Kalathra Vox's forward shields, through 20 meters of alloy, through 3 redundant reactors, and out the other side. Secondary explosions bloomed along the dreadnought's spine. For the first time in 3 centuries, the Kalathra Vox bled air and light. But it was far from dead. Veyari 9 spoke again, and this time there was something new in the synthesized voice. Emotion.
Rage.
Human. You will not survive this. Mara's answer was to accelerate straight at the wound. The Tycho Brahe was dying now. Half the crew were already gone, vaporized by near misses. The hull temperature was 1,200 degrees and climbing. But the old survey ship had one more trick. Phase 4, the part nobody gets to walk away from. Deep in the engineering, Sparks Okafor triggered the final sequence. The ship's fusion core was deliberately destabilized. Containment fields began to collapse in a very specific pattern. In 30 seconds, the Tycho Brahe would become a 41,000-ton shaped antimatter charge. Mara opened a channel 1 last time. Veyari 9, she said, voice calm even as blood trickled from her ears from ruptured capillaries. You said your ship was unstoppable. Let's test that. The Kalathra Vox tried to run. For the first time in its existence, it turned its stern to an enemy and accelerated. It was not fast enough. The Tycho Brahe rammed the wound it had already carved, sliding into the dreadnought's guts like a bullet into a lung. At the moment of impact, the core went supercritical. The explosion was visible from the surface of Epsilon Eridani 4. A second sun, brief and furious. When the light faded, the Kalathra Vox was in 3 pieces, tumbling, dark, silent. The Veyari Dominion never recovered from the loss. The myth of invincibility was shattered by one half-broken cruiser and a captain who refused to run. Years later, children on 100 worlds would ask how humanity turned the tide of the war. Old veterans would lean in and tell them the truth. It wasn't humanity. It was one stubborn Martian woman who looked at the biggest, meanest ship in the galaxy and said, "Not today." And in the void where 2 ships once fought, a small plaque drifts to this day, welded to a piece of the Tycho Brahe's hull that somehow survived. It reads, "We were outgunned.
We were outmassed.
We were going to lose. So we changed the rules. Captain Mara Vale and the 214 souls of CSS Tycho Brahe, they stopped the unstoppable.